Alter. Audio not muted. Alert disabled. Alert disabled.
For those who are just coming in, we're going to give everybody just a couple of minutes maybe here to be able to get in and get connected to our webinar this evening. We definitely want to welcome everyone who is joining us this evening and are excited to have you be a part of our kickoff session of our 30th anniversary of the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. And we'll be talking a little bit about that this evening. Welcome and thank you for joining us. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started this evening. We are, again, excited to be here this evening with everyone who's able to join. My name is Chad Price. I am the director for the Student Accessibility and Inclusive Learning Services, which was formerly known as the Disability Resource Center. Our name was just changed this year, and so we're still getting used to saying it. So if we say Disability Resource Center, it's the same thing as our Student Accessibility and Inclusive Learning Services as well. We are celebrating the 30th anniversary of the ADA, and this is our kickoff session for this whole year. Over the year, every month, we're going to have a different activity or event that we invite all of you to come back and to participate in and learn a little bit more about disability, about access, and how to be more inclusive in the things that all of you might be doing, whether it's here at the university or whether it's out in the community or in anything that you might be doing in your own life, whether it's employment, activities. So hopefully this evening you'll be able to learn a little bit about us, our office, as well as what it means and a little bit more about accessibility. As mentioned, our office is the Student Accessibility and Inclusive Learning Services, and you will see that more and more as we continue to make shifts and changes to the things in our space, whether that's our website or our communication. This evening, I would like to introduce you to our panelists, so those who are part of this evening and who will be sharing their experiences and their knowledge with each of you. And so to start off, I have asked each of them to share a little bit about themselves. And so we'll start off just in the order that we have listed on the screen. So Renee, will you start us off, please?
Sure. Good evening and welcome again. My name is Renee Hackman and I am one of the accessibility consultants on the Tempe campus. I have been full-time employee with our office for over 20 years now. Primarily, I've spent most of my time coordinating our testing accommodation services on the Tempe campus to ensure students have access to demonstrate their course learning through timed assessments. And I am a ASU alum. I taken my bachelor's in religious studies degree, and before I started full time with the office, I grew into my position by starting as a volunteer and then a student worker that led to the full-time employment.
Right. Thank you, Renee. Next, Jacob Bunch, will you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Jacob Bunch. I'm the Senior Program Coordinator for our alternative format services at ASU. So I've been with ASU, I'm going into my 5th year. I have an extensive educational background related to disability and accessibility. I have 3 master's degrees, one of which is in nonprofit and social policy from ASU in 2010. I have a master's degree in special education from Grand Canyon University, and then a master's in higher education and administration also from ASU. And I am currently a doctoral student at ASU, specifically studying the student population with which I work every day, students with print-related disabilities, and how educational access and equity issues in terms of an individual and systems level impacts those students. As you can probably tell from my degree introduction, I am an ASU alum 3 times over. So I have a deep affinity for the ASU community. As I mentioned, I've been with ASU for about 5 years, and my primary role is to advocate for universal design for learning and for the accommodation coordination related to alternative format services. So how I came to be involved in the center was also similar to Renee as a student. I was first a student volunteer, transitioned into intern, and then ended up parlaying into a full-time position here over a period of years. So I consider it one of the highest honors of my life to work here. It's something I have always had my heart set on doing, and I try to do it. I try to do so with a servant's heart, given that that I've experienced accessibility issues, and I want to help students to mitigate that for their educational access and equity. That's a little bit about me.
Great. Thank you, Jacob. Cedric, would you introduce yourself? You're on mute right now.
Alter. You are muted. Press Alt to mute your microphone. Or press and hold.
Sorry about that. I'm Cedric Green. I am the program coordinator, alternative media. I'm a newbie. I hadn't been here for 20 years or even 5. I got hired in December of last year, and then COVID happened. I am an alumni. I graduated in 2017 with my bachelor's in history and minor in political science. I mean, I came to university from 4 other universities in pursuing my bachelor's, and with varying degrees of accessibility. And my best experience by far was at Arizona State, with the level of commitment the university provided, and the resources that you have available to you. And but yeah, I just wanted to be able to serve our student body and to help them, you know, achieve their educational goals, because you know it's not easy, but you know, hopefully through the services we provide, you know, we approach that level of equity.
Thank you, Cedric. Elizabeth, introduce yourself.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Martin, and I've been here for 3 years. I'm an ASU alumni. I graduated 2018 with a master's degree in higher education. And I'm interested in working with disabled students because I wish to see them succeed. Because I myself, as a deaf student, I see, I want to be able to see their education succeed and be able to bridge the gap between both worlds so that for their success.
Thank you, Elizabeth. All right, Jim.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, my name is Jim Morin. I am been given the honor to be the Disability Resource Center historian. The reason behind that is I'm in my 40th year with the program. And how did I get involved with that? Back in 1982, I just moved to Arizona. I was employed with a computer manufacturer, wasn't happy there. And I ended up on the campus one day and ended up at the HR office, pulled a position on an index that was posted on an index card there, and it led me to the Disability Resource Center. And I met Teddy Scharf, who had just been hired as a director of the Disability Resource Center. She had been there for less than a month. And back then it was called Special Services for Disabled Students. That's the first generation of names that were given to the program. And essentially when I sat down to interview with her, she basically just said, well, what would you do for the program? Because I was not a specialist in any area of disability, although my background with working with disabled children and some adults went back to when I was actually in elementary school. My sister ran a program for mentally challenged kids from the age of 5 until 16. And I was given the position as her recreational programmer. Essentially, we had, the reason I was given that is because we had toys. We had mini bikes and snowmobiles, and they didn't have four-wheelers back then, but I used to entertain the kids doing that stuff, and then we would play different kind of sports and everything else. And then, yeah, I left Maine in 1982, drove out here just on a whim, ended up at the Disability Resource Center, and was given the position to oversee basically a wheelchair repair shop and a transportation program that was just kind of getting off the ground. They had the vehicles, but they really didn't know how to run it. So I took it over, got the program growing. I was also involved with adaptive physical education. We did a hiking blind trips across the Grand Canyon rim to rim a few times. We did some accessible, downhill skiing, cross-country skiing, water skiing, all kinds of sports, because there wasn't anything really organized at the time. outside of the recreation center that John Figge was running. So got quite involved with that. But to keep it kind of short, things have evolved over the years. We did we started with one golf cart providing services to basically disabled veterans, and then we had a wheelchair repair shop assisting those veterans. And that program just kind of blossomed over the years. The transportation program blossomed over the years. We went from that one golf cart now to, well, we have 12 in Tempe, and we have golf carts on all locations of the ASU service area, Polytech, downtown, as well as west. We're providing services in a normal year of about 500 plus students annually. These are students with temporary disabilities, permanent disabilities, and also we're serving staff and faculty as well. But essentially, yeah, I've been here since basically day one, and I'll be here for at least a few more. But yeah, that's about it.
Thanks, Jim. Teddy, should you introduce yourself?
Everyone, my name is Teddy Moya, and I am an access consultant on the Polytechnic campus. Share a similar role to what Renee and Elizabeth do in working with students to create accessibility in the classroom. I have been with ASU for only 3 years. It feels like a lot longer than that. But I am an ASU alum. I earned both my undergrad degree and my grad degrees at ASU. My undergrad degree is special education. So it's always been something that's I've wanted to pursue. It's always been a passion of mine. I actually spent the first years of my career teaching special education in the Kyrene School District. And then I went on to get my master's degree at ASU, and I got that in educational counseling. So I think all those things really meld nicely within my role as an access consultant. I also work on different training programs that we offer within SAILS, getting used to that name, within student accessibility and inclusive learning services. We work on all sorts of different ways that we can outreach to our faculty, staff, and students to teach them about accessibility. So that is, yeah, that's me.
All right, thanks, Teddy. And just to share a little bit about me as well. So as mentioned at the very beginning, I'm the director for the cells, and I have been at ASU since 1997. I came to ASU as one of our staff sign language interpreters at the time. And I had the opportunity to do that for about 7 years, and then moved into a supervisory role to oversee all of those services. And then was able to move into an associate director position, then moved to downtown in a director role, and then back to Tempe to oversee all of our offices. And so I fell in love with working in higher ed as an interpreter. I loved being in the environment and loved to see the excitement and energy that students have. And when I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I was on the 12-year program for that. And I got it in engineering. When I finished, I was like, I love higher ed, and I love doing what I was doing. And so I thought, I'm going to stick around and continue to find ways to support students and see them be successful. And what better way than to be a part of the Disability Resource Center, and now student accessibility. And it's still a great joy to see students be successful. And I love thinking about how students can go out after they finish here and go and change the world. And that's part of what we're hoping. Some of this stuff that we share will help you think about a little bit differently, as how you can help change the world to create accessibility for those that you will interact with on a daily basis. So again, thank you for joining us. We are located, our offices are located on 4 campus locations in the Phoenix metro area. So Tempe, downtown Phoenix, our West Campus, and then our Polytechnic campus. So we have offices in each of those locations, and it continues to expand. We also serve students who attend and participate through ASU Online, and we continue to just grow and expand. There's wherever ASU is, that's where we are as well. And we look for ways to support students regardless of how they are associated with ASU. One of the things that we would like to do is emphasize part of the ASU charter. Many of you have seen the ASU charter. The one that we have an affinity for, the part of the charter that we have an affinity for, says we're measured not by whom it excludes, but by whom it includes and how they succeed. And we have really felt an affinity for that phrase in a way that we love the charter. We love what it represents and what it means for students with disabilities, because students with disabilities have a value to add, not just to the university, but to the world. And so we use that charter as a way to help define the things that we do. One of the things as we think about the ADA, and so as a part of our celebration, Americans with Disabilities Act, it has been a part of ASU since it was signed in 1990. And one of the resources that we tap into that actually came before the ADA was the Association of Higher Ed and Disability, also known as AHED. That is an organization that has been around since 1977, which is around about the same time that the services here at ASU started to be provided to individuals with disabilities on campus. And Jim mentioned a little bit about that in his introduction. And so with that, I'd like to give Jim some time to share a little bit more about some of the history of ASU and serving students with disabilities. I'm going to share a few images. I'm going to pop them up for a little bit and then drop them off, just so that everyone can still see the interpreters. I do want to mention something. If you do have questions throughout any of this, there is a question and answer feature that you're welcome to throw questions in there. We do have some questions that we're going to ask the panelists. And so if you do ask a question, we will try and get to answer it. If we're not able to during our session, we will definitely get with you to make sure that we can answer your question that you might have. All right. One other thing I do want to add for those of you who have the Sun Devil rewards, the secret word for this event is access, the number 4, everyone. So access for everyone is that secret word. And when you check in for the event, you should get 25 points. So just wanted to make you aware of that as well. All right, I'm going to ask Jim if he can talk a little bit about the history. I'm going to share an image, and I'll probably jump through a few different images as we go, but give Jim a chance to kind of talk about some of those things that he has seen and that he has experienced over the 40 years, as he mentioned, here at ASU.
All right, the first photo you're looking at is our, it was actually the second location of at that time it was called Special Services for Disabled Students. This is located, this one particular photo is taken at the Student Health Center, ASU Health Center. That building has been completely remodeled, so it does not look like this right now. It's completely different. We were in there from 1980. Actually, I think they moved in there in 1980 itself. Diane Larson was the original director of the Disability Resource Center. They were originally located in the Franken House. And if you're familiar with the ASU campus, the Franken House sits where the Design North building is at the southwest corner of University and Forest. However, the building, the Franken House still exists. It's in the group of historic homes that sits next to the Mexican restaurant right down there by the railroad tracks. can't think of it right offhand, but it's off of Ash and about 6th or 3rd Street in downtown Tempe. Is it Macayo's, I believe, or
Yeah.
one of them? It is Macayo's? Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's 4 or 5 old historic homes there, and the Franken House still exists there. Now we were in the ASU Health Center building until 1989, I believe, where we moved to our current location, which is the Matthews Center. So we went from one older ASU building to a much older ASU building. But however, they did gut it out for us and made it some pretty useful space, and we're still in there today. And this is one of the original staffs of the Disability Resource, well, Disabled Student Resources. So the name has evolved at the point of this this photo. Quickly, that was me a couple years ago anyway. To the right is Edna Teddy Scharf. She was the director for, gosh, almost 30 years. Yeah, she is very critical and totally involved with the ADA. She was actually invited by President George Bush for the signing of the ADA, so she did attend that. It was quite an experience because we were, as the little staff that we have, we were kind of involved with a lot of the issues that were talked about with the ADA. And to, I guess, our right of Teddy is Jay Tasca. He worked with the blind, visually impaired. Lee Jones worked temporarily with the, he actually started the first computer lab, which was located in a garage behind our building. The garage was converted and insulated and given air conditioning, which they found out was way too strong for the cubic or the square footage of the building. The first time they turned it on, they blew out windows. However, that was fixed. To the right of Lee is Jim Hemauer. He was, I graduated from ASU and worked as a disability resource counselor for several years and eventually became a assistant director of the Disability Resource Center and retired probably about 10 years ago. And next to him was Sue, and I can't think of her last name. It was a long time ago. She worked with the learning disabled. And Deb Tasca is the one on the far right. She worked with the learning disabled as well. And Sue kind of picked up cases with the blind and visually impaired as well as the learning disabled students. Yeah, this was one of the first vehicles we actually purchased. We didn't have any money to buy vehicles back in the early 80s. However, this gentleman out in Glendale, where actually Grand Canyon University sits now, owned a farm. And he was a machinist, and he designed this vehicle called the Electric Pal. It was a great concept. However, hydraulically, the whole thing would drop ground level and a wheelchair ramp would deploy. You could roll right into it and drive it. Of course, he never thought of tie downs or any securements, so you're on your own for that. We actually bought a version of this from him. It actually had two front seats, so I could drive or one of my student workers could drive. And there was plenty of room in the back for a wheelchair to pull in. However, without suspension or securements, it didn't do too well, so we didn't keep it very long. This is one of the vans we owned. This was probably, this was purchased, I think, in 88 or 89. And we're used primarily to take students, especially those using wheelchairs, powered wheelchairs for servicing at some of the downtown Phoenix vendors that could provide quick repairs for us. The students didn't have to miss class, so we would shuttle them back and forth, basically sometimes 3 or 4 times a week, just to keep them going, and so they would reduce their downtime from classes. This is part of my program now. We went, we've kind of grew. We're at this point, we're over in the Matthews Center where we are now. We have 11 of these carts on campus now. We're transporting up to, or we're doing upwards of 300 trips a day with these things during normal periods. This provides services to students that have permanent disabilities, temporary disabilities. We have several students that are coming to ASU now because they are ambulatory but can't walk long distances. And they really don't utilize any type of assistive equipment. So they can utilize our cart service to take it from class to class every day. And not only that, from the residence halls, parking lots, and then back at the end of the day. Students use this, they come in and register, we set up ride schedules. We'll run up to 11 carts at one time, transport, like I said, probably up to 300 trips every day. We're not experiencing that right now, but I hope by next spring we'll be right back to it.
Very good. Thank you, Jim. You know, it's amazing just the different changes and things that have happened over the years. Everything from whether you're talking about space to our DART services, which has been fun to just go back and look at some of these pictures and some of the history that goes into it. It's just amazing how far we've really come when it comes to accessibility, and thinking of just where it started off with really working with those with veterans and making sure that they had access, those who are coming back from the war in the 70s, to now such a much even more broad scope of the things that are being done here at ASU. So thank you for sharing that history. What a and he only touched on just a little bit of it, and yet just some amazing things that have taken place over the years. So thank you, Jim. So now we've got a series of questions that we've got to ask for our panelists, and so these questions we're just going to kind of go through and ask them here. If they spark questions for those of you who are in attendance, please by all means post your questions that you might be interested in asking. The first question that we have is, what is the difference, or what is different about K-12 and higher education in terms of accommodations? And Teddy, would you start us off and talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I'd love to. So I think one of the main differences, is the law we operate. So in K-12, we operate by IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Act. And in higher education, we abide by the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. There's a couple big differences there. I think primarily, K-12, we're looking at ensuring success of students through modifications. Okay, so it's a little bit different in higher education. Our focus is more on access. Of course, we want students to be successful, and we do everything we can do through accommodations to help them be successful. But I think that's like one of the big differences. I think students come to us, with IEPs or a 504 plan from school, and they, and they're used to having modifications done. And we operate a little bit differently. We work more with accommodations. So those are just slight adjustments rather than changes, significant changes. So I guess I would summarize and say that we operate, by different laws for sure. And then we also, just in how we service students, is different too. I would also just say, and I don't know, anyone else, maybe Elizabeth might want to chime in here too, that I think in higher education, I think we focus more on self-advocacy. The student is, when you're in K-12, you're relying on your parents maybe and others to talk for you and to do things. And in higher education, we're trying to help students use their voice. They have to self-identify their disability. They have to seek services. We're there to help them and advocate for them, but we also want to teach them to advocate for themselves.
Great, thank you. Elizabeth or Renee, would you like to add anything to that?
Just the fact that through the accommodations given student access in higher education. Students are still expected to meet all the fundamental requirements of their course program to graduate from a higher education institution.
Thank you. Yeah, a very large focus on access and ensuring that the students have access to that education. Great. Thank you.
If I can add one thing.
Yeah.
In some research that I've read in my doctoral study, it actually shows that self-identification of disability in higher education is withheld by almost 3/4 of students that actually could benefit from those services. So I think one of the things that our office is really good at is trying to connect with the student where they are and empathize with their need and help them to mitigate their educational barriers where possible. But maintaining that there's an expectation that they self-advocate and identify, and that there is under the law per se, that they'd still have to be otherwise qualified. You know, there's this definition of otherwise qualified under the 504, which mandates that with or without an accommodation, students must maintain the programmatic standards of the university. But where I have noticed in my role is sometimes students are just a little hesitant to self-identify and what that experience is like for them. And so I'm helping them to mitigate that. The barrier to even self-identification is a big part of what our office does. We can't seek out students as you can in K-12. They do have to come to our office and identify. But I do feel like one thing that our office does really, really well is trying to meet the student where they are and find ways to help them, like I said, mitigate those educational access barriers to the best of our ability.
Thank you, Jacob. Yeah, I think it's important for us to remember that they do need to self-disclose. And I think as a university, we have a great faculty who will pay attention to the needs of students and are really ready and able to reach out to us to help find ways to connect those students. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit as well. All right. So how are accommodations determined? Elizabeth, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The different ways that what that would mean. We would discuss and find out ways to help the students. Sometimes it means finding the right accommodation specific to that individual. And also through the documentation, medical, psychological evaluations, history. And that would help us determine what the best accommodation would be for them. Also, we want to not only give them advice, but we want to listen to the students' needs, because sometimes they know what they need better than we do. I mean, they're the experts in themselves. They're the experts in their own disability. We're there to help provide the access.
Great. Thank you.
I would say just to add to that too, I think just to piggyback on a little bit what Elizabeth said, is that so we just look at the impact of the disability. You know, like Elizabeth said, the student knows best how their disability impacts them in the classroom. So we find out, we get really, you know, we get really in-depth conversations with students and find out the impact. What does it look like in the classroom? How is this interfering with you attaining your educational goals? And what barriers does your disability you know, put forth in the classroom, and then we determine reasonable accommodations based on that.
Great.
And also, as we're working with students with newer identifications of disabilities, and we're listening for barriers, we always leave the door open so that as they really get into their academic program and see if there are other barriers that begin to come up, we make sure that we have an, I guess, open door policy so that students know that we're here to be a resource and can listen and talk through other kinds of access or other kinds of campus resources that they may be able to take advantage of.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, Chad. Also,
I'd like to add a little bit more.
Go ahead, Cedric, and then Elizabeth.
I just wanted to add that accommodations, when I received them as a student, they weren't static. When I was a student, coming in, I was a pretty high partial at 20/200, and throughout my time at ASU, my vision did worsen to the fact that I did need additional services that weren't in my beginning plan, but the option to change those and morph those accommodations was always available to me. So.
I'd like to add also that accommodations, people think that there might be an accommodation that fits all people who have a disability. And we work to try to adjust those things to be fit for the independent individual student. When I was a student with ASU, I was told I needed CART services, but I didn't want CART services. It was interpreting services that helped me understand and access my class content much better. So the point being that there's not just one accommodation that fits all, and we work to identify that.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. So kind of thinking about accommodations in general, and as we determine accommodations, how would you explain what a reasonable accommodation is?
You can jump in there. So a reasonable accommodation would be something that creates access in the classroom. So for example, when we learn this through the intake process with the student, what's needed. So for example, a student, and everyone else I'm sure has great examples, but say a student who has an intentional deficit disorder or something along those lines, they might need just additional time for testing, for example. So that might be a reasonable accommodation for them, is to provide them with additional time for testing in a distraction-free environment. A student who might have a medical condition where they have flare-ups from time to time might need accommodations that pertain to like attendance or in class if their disability interferes with them attending class from time to time. So So they're just slight adjustments. We're not changing anything where it wouldn't be a fundamental alteration of the class, but just those slight adjustments that level the playing ground is what would be considered reasonable.
Another reasonable accommodation for individuals that need to reduce the barrier in a lab course situation. We may hire a lab aide to actually help the student physically do the lab or verbally talk through the lab to help reduce the barrier to provide access as well.
All right, thank you. So another question, and actually one that came up in the question and answer area, and also a question that we were planning to ask, relates to what information do we disclose about a student? And one of the person asked is, how do you tell, do we tell our teachers our exact disability, or do we tell them details? And so, so what do we disclose about students when they come and register with our office?
Elizabeth, I'd like to jump in there. We can tell them what accommodations that we have, and that's it. We don't tell them what the disability is. They do have a choice if they want to do that or if they want to keep it hidden. It's up to the student. But some disabilities are more, shall we say, visible than others. But also the teachers are aware of the students. But the law is put in place in order to help protect those students.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will disclose your accommodations, but we do not disclose your disability. That is totally up to you. And that's something that we are very serious about your confidentiality. And it's your right whether that information is disclosed or not. And so if you choose to share that with your faculty, that's totally up to you. Sometimes it might be helpful, other times not so much. But as you experience your educational experience continues on, you'll get a better sense of what might work best. And of course, you can always talk to us. We're happy to dialogue and discuss the pros and cons and what that might look like for you. All right. So a question that does come up from time to time is, can an instructor refuse an accommodation?
Instructors can't really refuse accommodations. We work together with students and faculty to find ways to provide access that are reasonable, as long as we're not fundamentally changing the course requirements. And sometimes that really takes thinking outside the box, sometimes to find the right access for any individual student.
Thanks, Renee. Yeah. Anything to add? Teddy, Elizabeth, on that one?
Elizabeth, no, I think she covered it.
Very good.
Yeah, I would just say that it can be it can be a little tricky sometimes, but we like to really collaborate and work closely with faculty and hope that we come to some sort of resolution and way to work together. And usually we're able to do that.
And to parlay a little bit off of what Teddy and Renee have mentioned, I do think having the collaborative open discussion with the instructor to kind of explain the accommodation and its place in the educational environment, whether that's on ground or online, really helps them to kind of cement their understanding of its context. So if you if you're around me for any length of time, you'll understand I'm a context person. So I like to make sure that people understand when I'm collaborating with an instructor to help them understand the placement of that accommodation and its importance to mitigating the educational barrier that exists for that student, helping them to understand the context in which that accommodation is used to present access. So two of the areas in which I am heavily involved is accessible course materials in terms of textbooks and remediations of inaccessible course supplementals and assistive technologies. So helping the faculty member to understand the placement of those things and how the appropriate use of those things in the educational environment what can help to lessen or perhaps all the way mitigate and access barrier for a student.
Thank you, Jacob. One other thing to just keep in mind that we often refer to the process of working with faculty as an interactive process. So, and it's actually, this interactive process includes faculty, students, and ourselves. So anytime a question comes up or a concern about an accommodation, then we have a conversation to discuss, as Renee pointed out, as Jacob and Hedy all pointed out, how do we ensure that the student has access? And so the accommodation, maybe the original recommendation may not be the best fit based on the fundamental nature of the course. And so we look at alternatives, we look at options to make sure that the student still has access and can access everything that any other student is accessing for the course. So the interactive process is an important aspect of what we do to ensure that access. All right, so we'd like to ask a little bit about our panel here, a little bit about the things that we do. So, you know, what types of things are we doing to support faculty, staff, and students to both increase awareness, but also provide support. And I think this is a great opportunity for our panelists to talk a little bit about some of their areas of expertise and some of the things that they are doing. And so, Cedric, would you start for us?
Yeah, I mean, sorry about that. My area is with assistive technology and screen readers in specifics. Like I said, I was a high partial. I didn't use a screen reader until about 3 years ago. But I wouldn't be able to do my job at the university without screen reader. Now, you know, I know multiple screen readers. I know JAWS. I know Narrator. I know VoiceOver for Mac because I use all of those systems. So I have to be able to access them in some type of way. But my area is just that knowledge and being able to pass that knowledge on to our student population to help them with their educational goals.
Thank you, Cedric. Jacob, you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing?
Yes, so as I mentioned when we first started, I'm the senior program coordinator for our alternative media services. So I work, Cedric and I are co-workers. We together oversee that accommodation service area. with that said, in the scope of my role, I provide general oversight of the accommodation to make sure that it's fulfilled in a timely manner. And I also provide a lot of assistive technology training specific to students with specific learning disabilities and physical disabilities. As Cedric mentioned, he works primarily with blind visually impaired students in assistive technology. And one of my other roles is to advocate for and help the university to develop plans for universal design for learning, and to implement that framework to make sure that there is a more cohesive universal approach to instructional access. And then a large part of my role involves dealing with the publisher negotiations for particular titles and between particular publishers and titles specific to the textbooks that required textbooks in courses. So to give you an idea of the scope of alternative format, in this particular term, we are servicing over 1,800 requests for alternative format in various types of alternative format. So including Braille, accessible Word documents, and accessible PDF documents, and some offline types of accommodation in alternative formats such as MP3 or large print. But primarily, our students will utilize the various types of alternative format that we provide with various types of assistive technology to help them to increase their comprehension of and intellectual access to or physical access to the course material. So as I mentioned, this is a role I've been in for 5 years, but I do have a lot of end user experience in this area as well. And so it's something, as Chad can tell you, I'm very passionate about. My mantra is always making sure that we provide an equitable and accessible experience for students. And mine and Cedric's joint role is to make sure that the course materials, if there are any barriers to those printed course materials for students affected by blindness, visual impairment, sensory disability, physical disability, learning disability, what have you, that those are mitigated. I will mention that most of our students, 97%, almost 98%, use accessible PDF or some other form to use with our partnered service of Kurzweil Education, which provides a literacy support assistive technology for students. A smaller subset of our students, roughly 2% or give or take, use the more intensive types of accommodation, being accessible Word documents, which entails all kinds of navigational features specific to specific to the needs of students who are blind or visually impaired. And then we also produce for a smaller subset of students Braille or tactile graphics. So,
Thank you, Jacob. Elizabeth, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the programs that we are working on, such as the summer programs and camps? Maybe share a little bit about that.
Summer programs, and by that, Chad, you mean the meals, the lunches and dinners, or?
No, the program that you are working on for the incoming students. Yeah, sorry
Gotcha.
about that.
Okay. Okay. It's been a while. So I've been trying to develop a camp for students from high school to college in that age range to help them to understand the transition and how to understand their disability, how to navigate the role of being independent. And so I'm hoping to have that camp in place soon so that we can have that next year. And it's exciting to have you know, I love to teach. I love to teach the students to have self-awareness of their disability. I personally, I mean, I had that experience, but I had more acceptance of my disability when I was taught by my peers, by my advisor at school, to really accept who I was and to accept that sometimes accommodations would become really the key to accessing my classes. And so the camp is something that I envision helping with that. So I'm hoping to develop that.
Perfect. Thank you. Renee, can you talk a little bit about our scholarships that we have the privilege of being able to award?
Sure. But our center has a number of scholarships that we are able to award each year to students to help them with books for living expenses and just help them have that little bit of extra access to focus on their academics and not struggle quite so much with worrying about money all the time.
Great. Yes, absolutely. We've been fortunate to have a few different scholarships that we've been able to award on a regular basis. Students do need to apply each year, and the awards really do depend on the available funds, but it is a great resource, as Renee just described. So something that for each of you who are students to look out for and to apply. Those scholarships should be opening up for next academic year here in about a month or so. So please watch for those. You can search for them under disability and look for the different opportunities that may be available to you. Teddy, can you talk a little bit about our the Access Zone and some of the other trainings that we're doing for faculty and staff?
Would love to, yes. So we have Access Zone, which if you're not familiar, sort of in the same vein as Dream Zone and Safe Zone. It's a customized training, could be an hour and a half up to 3 hours. But the main goal of this training is to increase institutional awareness regarding working with students with disabilities. So this training is for staff, faculty, and students. We've adapted it really nicely to a Zoom version. And we also have a Canvas version of it. It's really an awesome training. We've got really great feedback on it. We go through the history of disability. We talk about disability law. We take our participants through some experiential activities to help them understand what it might feel like to be challenged in a learning environment. We talk about our center and what we do, and then we end with discussions about access, inclusion, and universal design. So we're really enjoying that, and I encourage you, if you're interested in that training, please reach out to me and I can help schedule that for you. We also are doing a lot of lunch and learn sessions. These are things that are near and dear to my heart as an educator, because I love this part of what we do, that we can provide these kinds of resources and services. But our Lunch and Learn series is primarily for faculty and staff as well. We cover a variety. We have an amazing group of individuals who work in sales, and they all have some specific expertise. So we've been able to leverage that expertise, and they come and they do lunch and learns. We have one access consultant whose background is working with veterans and and she brings that to the table. Elizabeth has done lunch and learns. I'm working with students who are deaf, hard of hearing. We have a variety of different subject areas. So we do those probably a couple times a week. We're running those. Jacob does those. Renee has done those. They're really wonderful. So those are published on our website, and they're published on our events page if you're interested in those. We're also just involved in lots of different campus initiatives as well. I know on my campus at Poly, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's one group of engineering instructors are working on a peer mentoring program for students on the autism spectrum, and they're consulting with us, and we're working with them. So we just have a lot going on, and it's pretty exciting that we're moving forward and teaching others.
Yeah, those are some of the most exciting things that we have right now that we feel really excited about as we continue to increase awareness across our campus community, to continue to work towards a more accessible as well as more inclusive environment for students. And like Teddy said, it's been very well received. So anyone who is interested, by all means, let us know. There's a question about how do we get on the mailing list for those lunch and learns. We'll make sure that we connect with you to get you on that list, and anybody else that's interested. We try and get them posted on our website. We try and send out a newsletter to faculty that has those listed. We're trying to also put them on the UTO schedule, as their scheduled trainings that's on their site. And then also I know Poly, they have a site where they post those trainings as well. So we try and get them in lots of different places. If you can't find them, let us know so we can make sure that we get with you. And Teddy, if you reach out to her, she'll make sure that you get that information. Very good. Jim, I've got a question. The next question is for you. How would you describe the importance of the ADA in higher education? And I'm asking you this more because of you're our designated historian, but you've seen a lot over the years. And so how would you describe the importance of the ADA in higher ed?
Well, in higher ed and other, I guess you could say, public schools, all the way from K all the way up to high school and then post-secondary. Yeah, from an architectural and accessible, being accessible architecturally, ASU benefits, basically because the campus itself is rather benign as far as inaccessible elevations and a lot of stairs and stuff. Even some of the oldest buildings on campus didn't require a whole lot of modifications to be accessible from the outside. Now, once you got inside the buildings, that was a very different story. But we've seen things evolve over the years architecturally, and then especially in the extracurricular activities like in football and baseball and all the sports facilities. I mean, Sun Devil Stadium has gone through renovations almost every year since I've been there. It's probably at its finest right now, and I apologize for the background noise if you can hear that. I think their mommy's home. But they've, as far as the sporting facilities goes, especially Sun Devil Stadium, but also improvements made with the new baseball facility. Wells Fargo Arena, or actually it's Desert Financial Arena now, has had some upgrades made to it. We're hoping in the near future to have a hockey arena built right next door. So that'll have a lot more accessibility than what the Tempe ice rink has currently for ASU students to attend to. But essentially it's, a lot of changes have been made. And a lot of it is just over the years of like our facilities management, learning what is really accessible. And essentially, it's just not a matter of, putting in a door opener from the exterior, but once you're inside, how's the student to get into each individual classroom or office that they have to get to. And I think we've been way ahead of the game for many years. And it's very, very accessible to anybody.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Are there any other thoughts about how you describe the importance of the ADA in higher ed?
I would just simply say that I think that there is starting to be a better connection to making sure that students with various types of disability profiles have both physical and intellectual access to course content, and whether that is mitigated by accommodations such as alternative format or assistive technology or some other sort of academic-based accommodation that can be built into the classroom environment. I think it's really important to point that out. And there is also a wider shift, and I keep mentioning this term, universal design for learning. So making sure that there's more of a connection to universally designed course content for students, so that irrespective of their ability level or irrespective of their prior prior knowledge of a subject, or irrespective of the particular access issues that they present with respect to the curriculum, that they can have a more enduring understanding of it. I look at that connection that's starting to evolve in higher ed to making sure that the curriculum is more responsive and respectful of student backgrounds and abilities and needs. So making sure that we're attentiveness to that universality of course content access is an emerging piece of higher ed accessibility that I am seeing. And to kind of parlay off of what Jim has said, as a student, I chose to come to ASU because of the comprehensiveness of the services provided by the Disability Resource Center. In my view, from a student standpoint, this is one of the most comprehensively provided accessibility services of any institution I've ever been to. So I really like the fact that that as Elizabeth said, we really try to make it a collaborative partnership between the instructor and the student, and making sure that we individualize as much as possible that accommodation to make sure that it meets the student where they are. Like I said, I really do feel that one of the emerging areas of accessibility in higher ed is that universal design for learning aspect.
All right, thank you, Jacob. So how would someone encourage a student to register with the Student Accessibility Office? We get some of these types of questions from time to time from faculty, like, I see something and I'm not quite sure how to best approach it, because I don't want to be offensive either. And so how would I approach giving information to a student about potentially registering with the office? What are panelists, what are your recommendations?
I mean, I've had instructors walk, in days before we were working in kind of remote fashion. Instructors walk students down. We might not be seeing so much of that, but just like, tell the students about our services, encourage the students to reach out to us. I think it's less stigmatizing now. I think with our name change, it's less stigmatizing. The focus isn't on disability, it's more on accessibility. So I think as we continue to break down those types of barriers with students, they'll be more likely to seek services with us. But like just make the referral, tell the student to come see us, provide the website, tell them where we're located. Those are all ways that you can encourage that.
Thank you. And
So
Elizabeth?
this is Elizabeth. I would just like to say that you can also tell them that they don't have to register right away. You can have them call us, you know, set up an informational meeting where they can just come and see what it is we do and how we can give us a chance to interact with them, and then we can help them register in our office if they feel that it's a good fit for them.
Great. Yeah.
I think too, it's a good idea to give multiple resources on campus so that the students don't necessarily feel like they're being pushed to our office. Maybe recommend tutoring and bring up our office as a resource so that it's not just one resource that you're giving us that might be a little apprehensive.
Yeah, I often will tell faculty that one way to do it, and it was more related to the name when it was Disability Resource Center, is I would tell faculty to just try and sandwich it in between the other resources on campus and just be an additional resource that the students could consider. So, you know, depending on the situation, it's like, oh, you know, you could think about maybe talking to people in some different resources, career and professional development, counseling, the Disability Resource Center, the Student Learning Center, and provide kind of a list of different resources that are available. I do believe with the new name, it does change a little bit of the dynamic of what can be maybe the way that people might be able to address it, because the focus is on accessibility and inclusion. And so it does change that dynamic a little bit. In addition, as Teddy mentioned, is that as faculty, they can include that information in their syllabi to make sure that that information is available for students to see and just realize there's just another resource for them to tap into as a student. All right, very good. All right, so as many of our panelists mentioned, they have been students, they're alumni. They are experienced receiving accommodations as a student. And so a question for them is, what was one of the biggest challenges that you faced as a student? Or maybe barrier, you could replace that. What was one of the biggest barriers that you experienced as a student?
May I start? Okay. So I would like to preface what I'm about to say that none of this was experienced at ASU. It actually was all a very, very positive experience at ASU. But my educational journey has been fraught with a lot of barrier, and that barrier comes back to when I was in K-12. I was basically told that I was not college material and that I was not going to be successful, and that irrespective of my fortitude and follow through and whatever grit I had to make it in college, I was just not going to be college material. So, and I was told this by the K-12 special ed director of my high school, saying that because of the nature of my physical disabilities and my learning disabilities, she just really didn't think it was a good idea that I entertain the idea of going to college. And she wanted me to settle for a vocational certificate of completion and attendance and go into hotel management. So, so I then kind of took that and immediately, and I've shared this story with the staff members that are on on the call now, but immediately as a 10th grade student, I knew something in me I was going to dedicate my life to making sure that students that had similar access issues as I have had, were not going to experience them. And I was going to help to mitigate those barriers. So I knew immediately in that meeting that I was going to do that and serve students in that way. And I was going to get my doctorate so that I could prove a point, prove a point in a healthy respect. So I have not only been successful once in college, I have been successful 6 different times. So, you know, I mean, it's don't ever judge a book by its cover. And I feel like when I came to ASU, and I really wholeheartedly mean this, that when I came to ASU, I chose the university because of its comprehensiveness of services. And I felt out of all of the educational experience I had ever had, it was the most meaningful. It was the most meaningfully inclusive experience, and I felt that I could be a successful learner irrespective of my disability. So, but anyway, I connect with that experience, my K-12 experience, every day in servicing students. So I have made sure that those kind of experiences never happen again. And as an alumni of ASU, I'll just reiterate again that to me, there was the inclusivity is built into the charter. The inclusivity is built into the spirit of the staff and faculty. The inclusivity is built into the nature of what we do and how we do it. We don't just provide you accommodations, I feel. We provide you a way through, a way of accessing a course, either whether access barrier is physical or there's an intellectual access barrier. We work to mitigate that. And again, and I feel we do so with servant heart. We want to make sure that students have a meaningful educational experience as a result of interaction with our office.
Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah, Chad, my probably biggest accommodation or biggest challenge when I was at the university, I was enrolled in I was taking my requirement for foreign language for my degree. I had taken half of that requirement at a different university. I was finishing up that requirement at Arizona State. And at the time, my Spanish class was what they called a flip method class, where the instruction was primarily done through an application called My Spanish Lab. And our time in the classroom was basically to go over concepts that we learned from the software. The software wasn't accessible. I had great difficulty keeping up in the class because of the inaccessibility of the software. I don't know if you remember this, Chad. At the time, you were my access coordinator, but I ended up having to do a course equivalency, which was approved by my university, by my college, and the courses that replaced my 2 courses of foreign language were cultural studies classes in the School of Transporter Studies, and I made A's in both of those classes, but that was my last semester. So without those 2 courses, I would have had to delay my graduation. So.
Thanks, Cedric. All right, Elizabeth.
Probably the biggest barrier was being able to communicate with the teachers. Sometimes they took the perspective that I was a deaf person and either I was completely deaf, or I couldn't talk, or deaf and being able to talk a little. So sometimes the teachers would be really nervous. They'd be more nervous about interacting with me. And access of trying to communicate with them and teach them that there's a whole variety of deaf and hard of hearing students out there. And to be able to communicate with them without them being terrified to talk with me. So sometimes it was frustrating because they just wouldn't talk to me, or they would only email me back and forth, and that was very frustrating. And so trying to educate the teachers to learn how to communicate with us, is what we need, and to be okay with asking questions. I think that's a big part, because sometimes that's a big part of what we face, that they're afraid to ask us questions. We're open. We wish they would just ask us. And so that sometimes was one of my biggest barriers in school.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Renee?
Yeah, I think some of my biggest barriers came before 30 years ago. I'm kind of dating myself, but when I first entered college, I had to learn how to really self-advocate for myself on what kinds of needs I have to reduce those barriers. Now, most institutions have areas where you could have testing accommodations where you could go and receive a scribe or some extra time. But as a student with mobility and fine hand motor difficulties, at the time there were no flexible extensions guaranteed for assignments. So I really had the challenge similar to what Elizabeth was sharing, to really advocate for myself, and the challenge that some faculty were more open to communication and others just wanted to shut me down because they didn't feel like the course was reasonable for me to get through.
Thank you, Renee. I think the one thing that sticks out to me as I think about our staff and their experiences is just the impact that they went through, but made them better people because of the experience, in a way that now, as employees who are working for the office, can relate to the students who are coming to our office to request accommodations. They've experienced it, they've seen it, they know it. And what a great opportunity for any of you who are students who are attending tonight be able to relate and connect with those who have shared experiences. And there's research out there that shows that there's an importance to find somebody that you can connect with that has that kind of a shared experience to help you navigate through the university experience in general. And so I'm glad that we have this team here, from the experience that they've had within disability services over the years to their personal experiences of using accommodations and working with students. I want to thank our panelists as we wrap up. I am going to share a couple of screens to end our session this evening. This first one is just a reminder of the next couple of events that are coming up. If you want to go to ada30.asu.edu, that will provide you a list of the different events. There's 2 more events that are listed there currently. More will be added to that site as they come up. The next one will be the end of this month, the 30th of September from 3 to 5. We'll learn a little bit about more about the history of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And then on the 14th of October from 6 to 7, we'll have a focus on adaptive rec here at ASU and some of the things that have been done. We hope that you will be able to join us on those ones as well. Again, this is a year-long celebration. We are planning to add lots of different events and activities throughout the year through May of next year. The ADA was signed in July of 1990, and so it just passed its 30th year, but we're celebrating all year because of the importance that is brought to access for individuals with disabilities. And then this last page, just a couple of notes. First of all, thank you for attending and thank you for being here. You can email us student.accessibility@asu.edu. Our old email address, erc@asu.edu, still works. So you can also send an email to that one. There's a couple of websites, the eos.asu.edu/drc, that's /drc, is our site for our office. There's also another site, webaccessibility.asu.edu. This has some additional resources, which also includes these events, the event page for what we're doing this year. And again, hope that you have a chance to participate. We want to thank everyone that has participated tonight, our interpreters, our CART providers, our technical folks, everyone that has helped to make this happen this evening. And of course, those of you who have attended, thank you for taking time to spend this evening with us. I hope you all have a great rest of your evening and a great rest of your semester for those of you who are students and faculty. We appreciate your time. Have a good night.
Alter, 这个单词来回应。Alt F4, end meeting for meeting.